week's edition of Farmers Connection. Farmers Connection is a presentation of the Ministry of Agriculture and is brought to you this week in association with the Guyana Rice Development Board, the Guyana Livestock Development Authority, and the Pesticides and Toxic Chemicals Control Board. Farmers Connection is produced for television by Matrix Media Productions and Advertising based in East Berbice. I'm your host, Christopher Holder. In recent times, we have been hearing about a rice industry in crisis, about the cutoff between millers and farmers. Farmers not having been paid for paddy supplied to millers for the first crop of this year. Farmers now being forced to supply rice, paddy to the same millers who owe them for the first crop. What is the alternative? How are these farmers going back to the first crop of the coming year? We went with our cameras to Anna Regina, where the crisis has hit really hard and some $3 billion out of circulation because of the problem farmers face with non-payment for paddy supplied for the first crop of 2015, compounded by the low prices they are now receiving for the final crop of 2015. We sat down with two farmers, along with the General Manager of the GRDB and the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Agriculture, for a look at the local industry, what are some of the answers, and of course, the way forward.
The Guyana Livestock Development Authority, GLDA, wishes to remind all persons involved in the sale of beef that they must be able to produce an ante-mortem veterinary certificate as well as a post-mortem certificate on the animal that certifies it free from disease or infection before purchasing beef. Consumers are advised to ensure that their butchers and other retailers are able to produce these documents on demand. A butcher's failure to have these important and legally mandated examinations done before and after slaughter could expose consumers to dangerous diseases such as tuberculosis and other foodborne diseases that can result in serious illness and even death. Symptoms of food poisoning include severe cramps, fever, vomiting, and in extreme cases, severe organ failure that could be fatal. Safeguard your family. Ensure that the beef you buy is certified safe for human consumption. A message from the Guyana Livestock Development Authority, Ministry of Agriculture.
An important aspect of the GRDB's 6 steps to a successful rice crop is the use of balanced nutrition. One part of this practice includes the incorporation of mixed fertilizers such as the NPKs or separately as TSP and muriate of potash. This is done after the first cut during the dry period. If conditions does not allow for application on dry soil, then the next best time is before leveling. Incorporation before planting ensures that nutrients are present in the soil for access by the young seedlings.
Throw fertilizer before you plow the land or before you plant. You throw the TSP, the potash, and then you level up your land. And you throw
all fertilizer recommendations should be based on chemical soil analysis. A message from the extension arm of the Guyana Rice Development Board. The upward trend in the rice production figures in Guyana continue this final crop of 2015. In addition to the increased production figures, which have surpassed figures for the same period last year, exports of rice from Guyana has increased by some 16%, and this is despite the loss of the Venezuelan market. However, the value of the rice exported is not much more than for the same period last year. This, of course, is directly tied to the price per ton of rice sold on the open market, approximately $380 per ton, as against the $700 gotten from the Venezuelans under the Rice for Oil deal. Farmers on the Essequibo coast alone are owned billions by millers for paddy supplied to them for the first crop of 2015. For this crop are being paid as little as $600 per bag. This for some means that they are unable to afford the preparations necessary to sow the first crop of 2016. They are also now unable to honor their financial obligations across the board. It is estimated that the Essequibo produces an average of some 1 million bags of paddy, or $4 billion worth, More than a third of this amount is owed to farmers by a few millers on the coast. The fallout from this is that all Essequibo is hurting. Business is at a standstill. Well, that is business outside of the millers, who, according to farmers, are expanding and continue to take advantage of them in the face of the overabundance of paddy in the region. Farmers are forced to accept what is offered after all the deductions for dockage, moisture, being a rice farmer, etc. Farmers say even after all the weight reductions, they are still given a C grade or worse sample grade and paid $600 for a bag of paddy. The Essequibo farmers have proposed a number of interventions by government to help offer immediate relief so that they may be able to sow for the first crop of the new year. These interventions were demanded of government during meetings between Essequibo farmers, General Manager of the GRDB, and the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Agriculture, last weekend. It was after those meetings that I sat down with the two rice farmers and the administrators of the rice industry for a chat on the state of rice and, of course, the way forward. Gentlemen, welcome to Farmers Connection. Of course, today we're talking about the state of the local rice industry. We've had these meetings in Essequibo with all the stakeholders, well, the rice farmers themselves. We've had some suggestions coming from farmers in a formal setting. We've had those suggestions made. There is this perception that there is a crisis in the local rice industry, one that we've been talking about over the years. During the elections, this was a particular issue, the whole question of rice industry being in crisis. And the question that is being asked is, how do we go forward based on the current prices farmers are getting for paddy, supplied to mills? Mr. Hassan, as the General Manager of GRDB, the person who has an overview of the local rice industry, perhaps you could give us an idea of the price for rice on the international market and how those prices impact on the price farmers get, or the premise upon which farmers are supposed to be paid per bag of paddy.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Well, we've been explaining to the farmers what is happening globally, and more specifically on white rice prices, just around the $390 going up to the $400 per ton, according to Horizon. And Horizon, the index is an index that is globally used for monitoring prices. So it's more or less like an index that is accepted then by all the stakeholders. Let's put it that way. So right now it's between 390, 391. It started to show an upward movement by a few dollars because of the effect or the impact that the El Nino situation has been having on the countries that produce rice in much larger volumes than us, Thailand, Vietnam, those parts of Asia. So much so that some countries are looking at restricting their exports to ensure that their people are fed. It's less production, less stock at hand, so the prices started to climb. The impact of that, of course, because of the lower prices, then the millers will then use that price that they're selling their rice at to work back and pay the farmers the price of paddy. I had mentioned before that price paid at the time, the price paid for paddy, the 3,000 and over, when we were exporting to Venezuela, is because we were getting favorable prices, much higher than world market prices. We're getting $700 a ton for white rice, $400 a ton for paddy. Now rice is being traded at just under $400. So when we were getting $700 or $8, we had about the $3,000 or $28,000 to $3,000 per bag of paddy, and farmers were able to, and I think they were comfortably accepted that. This is not the situation now. And when we came out to seek farmers' input, contributions on recommendations that the GRDB can make to the ministry, and for the ministry, of course, to take it further on. We've had good meetings thus far on the coast, but let me stop here because you basically asked about price.
I want to bring in the farmers. We have two gentlemen here who don't look too stressed. This young man was smiling a lot. Tell me about your struggles as it is today, bearing in mind the price you're receiving from paddy, and why is this low price compounded by other factors, making it impossible for you to consider going back to the crop?
Well, Chris, let me go back a little. Primarily on the Essequibo Coast, about 85% of the people depends primarily on rice. Now, if you were to use some figures, now the Essequibo Coast produce approximately 1 million bags of paddy at an average. Now, with the Venezuela market at an average price of $4,000 per bag, it simply means that there would have been about $4 billion in circulation. Now, the Venezuela market is no longer there. The price would have fallen, the bags may have gone up, but let us just use the million bags at an average price of $1,700, that's 1.7 billion. So right away we see $2.3 billion being removed from the economy of Region 2. And that definitely would have a tremendous effect on economic activities and the standard of living of people on the Essequibo Coast. Because what we are going to have now is what you call a domino effect. Everything depends upon rice. Rice is no longer profitable, and so everything goes along with that. Secondly, speaking from a farmer's perspective, I've been planting rice for about 15 years now. And I'm in rice farming along with my son. And personally, we would have lost over $2 million this current crop. And the reason for that is because all the inputs into the crop were very expensive in terms of fertilizer. Some of the land that we do plant have been rented. So everything, all the inputs, the cost, everything was tied to this Venezuela price. Now with the loss of the Venezuela market, and the price would have gone down. So that's a predicament that you find that most farmers find themselves in. And for those farmers who depend wholly and solely on rice, it's a very serious situation. I don't know how they will go about maintaining their families and to go back into the crop. But I know, and I would have seen this already, that a lot of farmers would no longer be going back into the crop. A lot of farmers have already fenced their fields, and they have sheep and cows, diversification, and it is going to impact because definitely less rice will produce in Region 2 the coming crop.
All right. Jericho.
So then, for me, I personally had a fence and plant and I decided to mine some sheep and buy coffee gold because from 16 acre rice, we don't need that much, and the rice, new rent is only like about 14, 15. So I can imagine it like who rent for 20 and 25. They carry the bigger last.
That's $25 per acre.
No, 20
Per acre?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. At the meetings today, you coined a nice phrase, highway robbery. A lot of the times, the buck stops with the miller. The miller is the one who fixes the price for bag of paddy for a particular crop. And he determines this based on the price he's getting overseas. Farmers at these meetings have complained about the various ways in which the miller reduces the value of the paddy supply. And you have heard. What are your thoughts on this aspect of the arrangement?
Thank you, Chris. Unfortunately, we've only been able to hear from the farmers' side today. But on the basis of what the farmers have said, clearly we have a major disconnect in this entire value chain, the rice value chain. This farmer here would have done some calculations, and using a $388 per ton, that is the price that some farmers are receiving. Some millers. When he did his calculations, he worked back that at $1,700 per bag that the farmers are receiving. According to him, the millers are receiving $50,000 per ton after paying the farmers who are receiving $25,000 per ton. So all of the things being equal, and until such time as we hear something different from millers, it is worrying, and there is a lot of room for sharing of that profit that the millers are making.
Big fight.
The fact is though, the rice value chain includes the millers, farmers, input suppliers, the transportation people, the regulatory people. Is that there are a whole range of persons, all of whom are intimately linked. And if there's one group that exploits the system, there's a good chance that the system will indeed be unable to recover. We've got to recognize that, notwithstanding the chicken and egg scenario that appears to be occurring in the rice industry, the guy who can pull the plug most, who can easiest pull the plug, is the rice farmer. If he does not produce, then there's nothing to mill. Of course, he needs the millers to buy his value. But I want to use this program to appeal to all of the players in the value chain. Let us ensure that justice is served. If the situation allows for all of those things we heard to be addressed in a more equitable manner, we need to do it out of our own free will. But having said that, the GRDB is on notice, and the GRDB has indicated that it will take up all the space allocated to it in terms of ensuring that what the farmers are claiming to be injustices are investigated fully, dealt with, and where the law permits, we will get involved to the fullest extent. For example, the farmers are claiming, according to the meetings today, that they have percentage of weight added to take care of blockage, percentage of weight added to take care of moisture. And after having those additional weights being deducted from them, they're still graded as if the paddy is at the lowest grade. Clearly, from a logical standpoint, and again, maybe with ignorance, it doesn't appear as if the farmers are getting a free deal. But as permanent secretary, I am responsible for seeing justice to both the millers and the farmers. GRDB also is. What we need to do is ensure that we listen to, as we did today, to what the farmers are saying, and then at the earliest opportunity, present to the millers what the farmers are saying and have their rebuttal, so that we can together make this ensure. Rice is in crisis, but it's not a crisis that we can't manage. With equity, justice, and the meetings such as this one that we had today, these two we had today, we should be in a position where we can get over it.
Today's meeting focused on suggestions for a way out of the crisis as perceived by all. Perhaps you can give us your idea of what it would take to turn this problem as it is today.
Well, Chris, there are a number of things that can be done to reduce the cost of production. From a farmer standpoint, I have already seen steps being taken to reduce the cost of production. One, the farmers who are renting land, the landlords, so to speak, they would have already reduced their rent per acre. So that would result in the cost of production coming down. Secondly, I would have also seen that the cost for, or the price for seed paddy would have also been reduced significantly. For example, the previous crop, it was $5,000 per bag of seed paddy. I've noticed that at the seed bond there, they're selling for $3,500. So that's...
This is a GRDB
right.
facility. Yes.
So, an RPA. So right away, those are two areas where we see costs coming down. But, of course, those two alone would not do it. You know, very often you go to the back dam and you interact with other farmers, and very often people, they blame the government. Personally, I don't blame the government for the situation that the rice industry finds itself in, because the Venezuelans would have withdrawn the market, and quite naturally the government finds itself very helpless. So I don't personally blame the government. But where I think that the government can come in is that the government can subsidize the rice industry. Now, for example, in this country, we know that the sugar industry is in a very bad shape for years, and the government would have been offering subsidies to the sugar industry. We know that GPL also is in a very bad shape, and the government would have also been subsidizing GPL. In a similar fashion, now that the rice industry is in this situation that it finds itself in, I think that the government can subsidize the rice industry, and specifically, I think that what the government can do, the factor that contributes significantly to the cost of production is the price of fertilizer. And I want to use this program in asking the Ministry of Agriculture and the government to see what they can do to subsidize the cost of fertilizer, because fertilizer is very expensive. Another thing that can happen is that the taxes on diesel fuel can also be reduced, just like how the government would have done it for the miners. If the taxes are reduced on fuel, then quite naturally, the tractor operators, the combine owners, they are going to reduce their costs as well in terms of land preparation as well as cutting. That will bring the cost down. And also spare parts for the machinery owners. So if these...
Just to cut you there a bit, the spare parts, the duty and spare on agricultural machinery and spares.
They're VAT-free upon request. The Ministry of Agriculture makes recommendation to the Revenue Authority for it to be made back.
What's the tax on fuel as it is right now?
I'm not sure.
But I asked the question because I was wondering how much of a difference
it is significant. It is significant in terms of the actual selling price. I will not be able to tell you the exact figure. I mean, because I do listen to budget presentations and I would have known it in the past, but I know it is significant. And if it is removed, quite naturally the price of diesel will come down, right? Because up to the last crop, the average cost of production is about $2,500 per bag. Now, if we get those things that I would have mentioned in terms of the diesel and the spare parts and the fertilizer and the seed paddy already down, as well as the rent already down, I'm sure that farmers would be able to make something reasonable that will encourage them to go back into the next crop.
One of the points that were advanced during the GRDB 6-point plan for maximizing yield the whole question of improving yield per acre, especially now in a crisis where the more paddy produced per acre will impact directly on your earnings. Are you satisfied that everything is being done from an extension standpoint in terms of educating farmers who are culturally inclined to do things traditionally or in a way that they've been doing all along? Do you think that farmers have bought on to the whole concept of this 6 points, making it work to their advantage?
First of all, let me say this, that I am personally satisfied with the work that is being done by the extension officers. I am. Because very often I would go to the back dam and I would see them into the fields, and they do invite farmers to cluster meetings. I would have been invited on several occasions. As to whether they are buying into the new techniques in terms of the 6-point system, I don't think that it is that effective. Because most of the farmers, I don't know if it is because of tradition. They're accustomed of using the traditional system of broadcasting fertilizer and so on, that somehow or the other they feel that that is the best. However, a significant percentage of the farmers are buying into the system. And in extension to that, I need to compliment the Ministry of Agriculture and by large all the stakeholders in coming out with these new varieties, because what we would have noticed and experienced that the newer varieties of paddy like the 10, 11, 12 and now the 14, the yields are going up, and as long as the yields go up by the acre, quite naturally that will result in greater profits for the farmer.
What is your yield?
Well, it all depends on the crop, but the best yield that I would have had is with the 10 paddy, and that is approximately 43 bags per acre. With other varieties like 22-4 is in the 30s. And what I would have personally done is that I would have, since I started planting rice, I would have started experimenting with different varieties every crop. And I found that the 10 gives me the best yield on my land, and I stick to 10.
This whole concept of more yield per acre, in the discussions this morning with some of the other farmers at the other meeting, They were saying that certain lands in Essequibo are basically low yielding lands, and so they don't get more than 25 bags per acre. How do you see these farmers increasing their yield? It is believed that if you don't get more than 25 bags per acre, then making a profit is going to be very difficult.
Yeah, you know, Chris, rice production has expanded so much in Guyana and even the Essequibo coast that the farmers have gone right down to the backlands. So the farmers that are getting 25 bags per acre are getting it on what's called tort depth, where the soil type is different than the land up in front, right? So it's an issue of soil. That was a decision that the farmer has taken because, like I'm saying, what has been happening in rice gone into paddy production. I don't know, the research has to be continued in terms of what is the best suited variety and what are the husbandry and production practices that are applicable to that type of soil. Because what we have is the same variety being used on the different types of soil, right? And I mean, agronomically, that may not be so. So the GRDB research, they've already been alerted to that. Having heard this, as a matter of fact, just this week about the soil type and so on, in terms of the production that's had from that kind of a soil. So GRDB will have to do its research to see what is an appropriate variety to give the kind of production that is required for the farmer to come out above his cost of production.
All right, moving forward. Yes, perhaps you can give us an overview of how things worked. Farmers have been calling, and this is one of the suggestions coming out of this meeting, but we've been hearing it around the country. The need for an agriculture bank, or a bank that facilitates farmers, especially farmers in a situation like they are. You have a contract from a miller, which you can use as collateral to go to a bank at concessionary and interest rates, and be able to live until you get your payment. How did it work in the past?
Chris, the need is there for the facility, the service, not necessarily a bank itself, because it can be done through a window. We have been using it as recent as 2014 under the ADP, where we put money at GBTI. The loans were given at concessional terms because it was government money that was being on them. So it's nothing new, that it has never stopped. In fact, it was used under the EU for the very rice industry, where a few million euros were included. And but I would advocate that this be widened and that it be used as a sort of a cushion. But you know, you can't talk about the money, because it doesn't matter who pays it, you still got to pay back. And what the farmers are experiencing right now, we're speaking about, they still got to get the money to pay back. So even though you can have somebody to owe, the operative word is that you owe that someone. Yeah. What is interesting is that you need to be able to look at the number of things we're talking about. One, we're talking about lateness of payment. That's where owing somebody will help. But there's also the fact that you invest 600,000, you make 300,000. No bank can help that. But what these comrades were saying, and what you were asking also about the 6 points, one of the reasons why some farmers, and this is what I'm learning as I go along, cannot deal with the 6 points. 6 point call for timing. Now you sell paddy last crop. You haven't gotten the money as yet from last crop. This crop is being sold too. The time to get back in that crop, you need to get your money right away to go. That is where the institution talking about your help. So that the guy needs to catch the right sunshine, catch the right time for rains and everything, because that's what the 6 points speaks to. It speaks to timings. Timings are taken out to the whole concept of timing is not left in the hands of the farmers anymore. It's in the hands of the guys who owe them money. So when those guys are not paid, you say, man, with this brilliant sunshine, you should be doing land prep now. Yeah, it's brilliant sunshine, but they have no money. And then when you get some money, I don't need to get into that aspect of it. But I want to just digress a little bit and go back to the question of the range of yields. There has to be some discipline in the rice industry. It's not there. And you might have heard me advocate in the past about there being closed season for some activities. We close seasons for fishing. We close season for wildlife. But when you consider, if you drive into some rice producing areas, there is a farmer that is plowing, there is a farmer that's sowing, and there's a farmer that's harvesting. Now that's chaos for water control. Because of that different stages of the in proximity to each other, how do you get the guy who needs the water at the back, but who's late to get the water when the guy in front doesn't want water? So in addition to the differential soil types that you may have, you need to look at the timing of all the activities that we do. The other thing you need to look at is that farmers, with our assistance of course, need to do the proper soil testing to understand that this soil is this. And in order to make this soil there, you got to get the right application of fertilizer. At present, the average farmer does urea and 625-25. Is that what is really needed for every soil? Right. And in the same quantities. Right. So there's some work which I'm happy that GM is saying that they'll be putting the research people. The research people got to be active in dealing with this. So we need to look at yields. Now, I want to speak a bit more on yields too, because people speak about yields without understanding what yield means. I can take an area 20 feet by 20 feet by 20 feet, plant on that area, and extrapolate until I get 100 bags an acre. Because if I were to do this area, and I get so much, I can do the mathematics and get up there. Equally, there are guys who plant 5 acres, and there's such poor plant density that they really have planted 1 acre. When they get the yields, they are saying, well, I got 20 bags from 5 acres, so therefore I'm getting 4 bags per acre. But the reality is you get 20 bags from 1 acre. You planted it on 4 acres. So it's another thing that farmers got to look at now. The very good farmers in rice who are getting high yields are the guys who ensure that the plant density is adequate, and they go back in after they've sown. And if there are spaces, they resupply. And they check on it and they rogue and they do all the necessary things that got to be done. GRDB has to be doing its extension and continue to do the extension to work with those farmers to let them understand that it's not 100 acres getting 100 bags means 1 bag an acre. Or did you have the right plant density? Did you do the right things to get it there? To get back to the main point though, I mean, I haven't danced all over. The fact is, most of the farmers are competent, they're capable, and they're enthusiastic. The challenge is for us to put it all together now, where you can get the money on time, the right technical package for the farm, so they can get the yields up, and then the price doesn't matter that much, because a man with 55 bags per acre, who is paid as stipulated in the Rice Factories Amended Act, which gives him so much money at this time and so much money at this time, and is allowed to go back and can make do with even lower price than we have now. But the guy who was to wait a year for his money, he would have borrowed his wife stuff, he would have pawned jewelries, he would have done all kinds of things. And he's therefore in a position where this becomes more onerous. So my view is, the crisis can be averted. We have the right ingredients. We will be recommending to our minister the approach. We will be depending on the farmers to work with us. We will be depending on the millers to work with us, so that this industry, and I'm really happy how this brother put out the fact that you've lost this quantity of money for a region like this. So it is everybody's business, and we will work together.
The question of policing, you got a lot of blows at this meeting, at these 2 meetings, for GRDB's role, which is, I believe, sometimes misunderstood. Short of going with a big stick to the miller and say, let them pay the farmers or bust your head, the legal recourse, which farmers at these meetings have explained to be long-term a long-term affair. And of course, you have to face the fact that the miller will say that why you record me buying your body, and tell all the other millers don't buy your body. Is that so? The Rice Factories Act stipulates about all the things that you can do to force a miller to honor his debt. He has a contract, 40 days, whatever. What has fallen down with that in terms of the work?
In terms of the payment, I think from what we've heard, like some of the millers are not displaying the prices which they are obliged to do. It's because they were speculating. Some of them didn't know what the prices they were going to be getting for the rice. But that notwithstanding, they're supposed to display their prices. Some of the millers have said to me, because we have been asking, they said, yes, we can put up a price. When we're buying for a crop based on the goods, you want to give all the farmers the same price based on the goods. So we may put $2,000 now, and in a week's time it's $1,800, and the next time, based on how world market prices are moving, they would adjust the price. You might find it would go above $2,200. They said that they'd like to do that across the board, one price paying for a particular rate. That we've heard them, but we've insisted that the states are their price, which according to the law, they have to.
But the law also states they have to pay within 40 days.
42 days.
42 days.
42 days, yes.
These millers who defaulted have not been doing that.
Yeah, they're not like 62, 82.
Well, those who import plantains paid for the last crop.
And this,
have
let
exceeded
me
that
be
law.
honest with you, this money does means a lot, because me personally, when I did planting paddy and getting like $45 a bag, I used to have to save a lot of money. That's like, I put aside the money to get money oil, I put aside money for plowing, seed paddy and what's not. And sometimes, before I even shine the paddy, I was already purchased most of the fertilizer. And get it at $200 or sometimes $300 a bag cheaper. Rather than wait until when you're ready for the fertilizer now, you have to pay $200 more. For instance, a crop, I guess Zalim Jason buy to buy some paddy from the bank. Now I think them guys is selling the RTA is selling some fertilizer, right? Just because I had the money, I could able to get the fertilizer, I could think about $500 cheaper, $500 less. But I had the money in time not to go to buy it. Now me father them now after they didn't have the money, they had to end up now go and buy the same fertilizer $500, $600 more. So when you got the money in hand, you can save a lot. So this money means a lot.
Right. So Chris, you see, we're talking about money and so on. The business practices of the millers, they have to bring in more ethical, and I'm not saying that they're not ethical too, but they have to understand that it's not only their businesses that have to make the profit. They have to make profit. That's why they're there in the business. But they have to understand that their input supplies, which is the paddy growers, which is the rice farmers, right? The paddy growers. They're also critical to the sustainability of those businesses. What we've been hearing, and given the big calculation of this farm, 1/3 of the money for rice sold goes into the farm. It doesn't necessarily mean that the other 2/3 is profit. The mills have costs too. But it's this kind of thing the GRW will have to dissect, work with the millers, work with the farmers, and see how we can encourage, support, push the millers to have better prices being paid to farmers.
What we're talking about here right now is the short term. But medium to long term, the farmer organization has got to strengthen. At present, it's fragmented, and you have some farmers recognizing one group and some farmers recognizing another group. The law recognizes the RPA. The RPA is supposed to have every rice farmer as its member. The government doesn't get involved into pushing courses or taking them out of the RPA. It's their organization. But in other countries, you will see that the farmer organizations become strong enough that they can literally control the market and the release of, in this case, paddy, to the mills. As we speak, and has been happening for the last 100 years, you sell wet paddy. Wet paddy means you're at the mercy of the millers. The situation, the time has come when we're looking at the medium to long term for the Farmers Association, which is robust, got many members, they can afford to organize themselves better and be, ready for the challenge, to get involved in the other aspects of the value chain. You can imitate wheat, barley, and other grains similar to rice and the way it's done in other countries. Do you need, for example, to have within 1 week or 1 month all of the paddy that's cut in a scribble at the mills one time? Because what you have here is oversupply, and that means that it has an effect on the price. So the medium to long term will not see government, in my opinion, controlling this. To see the farmer organization locking in. You would have heard from today's meeting where one particular farmer was asking us to look into why a miller is willing to pay almost double to buy paddy from another miller than he was paying to the regular farmers. So the millers are organizing themselves. The farmers have got to organize themselves and stop seeing this as a thing that wants to have problems. You pick up the phone and call Big Brother, that's the government, to come and be there. We've been doing that and we will continue to work because we recognize it is national. But the long-term future of rice will see a producer organization where the farmers themselves will have the millers coming to negotiate on how much they are going to sell wheat for next crop. Because their futures market, people know what's going to likely to be. People know, there's so much information on rice. Guys are expecting droughts, and they were anticipating those droughts since last year. Now, once you have drought in the big countries that export rice, they immediately start exporting and start importing. I learned that there was a contract signed for America to export 1 million tons of rice to China. China is usually the big exporter. That has implications for us. That means that if you have an organized group, which is what I am using this medium to urge the rice farmers to get organized, get involved, get yourself together, and move this thing from simply being one where you're standing out and appealing to government and everybody to solve your problems, to one where the millers are coming to us and say, man, you got to talk to them guys holding us to ransom. Because the guys would have had themselves so organized that the paddy is sold wet, but it's sold to themselves. It's stored in their facilities. They sell it back as they need be, and they share the profits at the end of the year from the difference in price. So that is the medium to long-term solution.
Yeah, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you guys for sitting with us to have this conversation. I feel for you, farmer. And of course, GRDB has the work cut out for them in terms of, now the education of farmers in terms of improving yield, better management of the crop and all that is of paramount importance if you're to survive the crisis or the challenges that the industry faces today. Of course, PS is the intermediary with government and farmers. You too have the work cut out for you. We certainly look forward to some positives coming out of your cabinet presentation soon. But we'll be back to apprise farmers of what comes out of these consultations, which are ongoing nationwide. Thank you. A presentation of the Ministry of Agriculture and brought to you in association with the Ghana Rice Development Board, the Ghana Livestock Development Authority, and the Pesticides and Toxic Chemicals Control Board. We have just seen that conversation there with rice farmers, representatives of the GRDB and the Ministry of Agriculture. And we saw the problem, we saw the answers as expressed by the farmers themselves. But one of the key areas of concern to farmers is the question of being able to hold on to their paddy rather than rushing to the mill and taking whatever price the farmer has to offer. I saw online some features on drying facilities for that farmers can access in their bid to ensure that they are not taken advantage of. Once paddy is dried, its shelf life is longer, and therefore farmers, once proper storage is available, can hold on to their paddy and wait for a better price. So I thought I'd share this video with you about this simple drying facility, which if farmers come together, as is being urged by the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Agriculture, George Jarvis, in his meetings with farmers over last weekend, that farmers need to come together and form an association, one organization that represents farmers all across Guyana. As it is right now, you know, the situation is fragmented. The law, of course, states that the RPA is the only recognized body for rice farmers in Guyana, but we have this fragmentation: Berbice Farmers Association, Essequibo Rice Farmers Association. You know, it's very fragmented. Let's take a look at this video that I downloaded. Perhaps this or something like it might offer some solutions.
Before we installed this dryer, when dry season came, we found it very difficult to dry paddy. Sometimes we harvest 300 cavans of paddy, but they just rot because the paddy could not be dried, especially during continuous rains.
When we all dry at the same time, the multi-purpose dryer cannot accommodate all of our grains. So if you want to dry, you have to wait until the others are finished. More often than not, your grain will germinate before you even get to dry them.
Mike and Addie used to dry their paddy under the sun, like millions of Asian farmers do. Sun drying is cheap and environment friendly, but it has its limitations. It is not possible during overcast days and at night, and, with unpredictable weather these days, farmers are forced to store their grains longer and to delay drying. Sun drying is difficult, with more wet grains coming from intensified production, as more farmers harvest an additional rice crop during the wet season. The rise of combine harvesters that can harvest more paddy simultaneously in countries such as Cambodia has also made sun drying a challenge. It is labor-intensive and requires manual stirring for grains to dry uniformly. Because the temperature is hard to control during sun drying, grains may crack and they will have low milling quality. Laid out in roads and exposed, sun-dried grains are usually contaminated with dirt and stones. They can also be infested with fungi. These fungi can produce poisonous substances such as mycotoxins. Delayed, incomplete, or ineffective drying is the main reason for the deterioration of rice seed and grain. When paddy is harvested, its moisture content is usually at 20 to 25%. The quality of wet paddy worsens immediately after harvest. The wetter the grain, the faster the loss of quality. To prevent quality from deteriorating, paddy should be dried to 14% or less within 24 hours after harvest. One way to dry paddy but maintain high grain quality and reduce losses is by using mechanical dryers. An advanced type of mechanical dryer is a recirculating batch dryer, which is used in large rice mills and processors. However, this type of dryer is expensive because it has many moving parts that need to be serviced, and it often uses expensive kerosene for heating the drying air. The simplest and most affordable type of mechanical dryer is the flatbed dryer. Because of its simple design, in which the drying air moves through the grain in one direction from bottom to top, there is an even drying, with faster drying happening at the air inlet. Dryer users can mix the grain halfway through drying to minimize the moisture difference. To address the problem of uneven drying using the flatbed dryer, the Philippine Rice Research Institute, or PhilRice, together with Nong Lam University in Vietnam, worked to construct a modified version of the flatbed dryer, the reversible airflow flatbed dryer. The reversible dryer has four main components: the drying bin, the reversible air chamber, the blower, and the furnace. Heated air from the furnace is sucked by the blower and forced through the grain mass. Once drying begins, heated air moves up, drying the grain and absorbing moisture. During this phase, there is slight over-drying at the bottom and less drying at the top because the drying air absorbs water from the grain on its way up in the grain bulk and has less drying capacity when it reaches the upper layer. After 2/3 of the drying period, the direction of the heated air will be reversed, forcing the air down and drying the grains from the top going down. The wetter part on the top of the grain bulk is now dried more intensively and the bottom layer is dried less. The result is a more even moisture content across the grain bulk at the end of drying, leading to higher grain quality. In the Philippines, these dryers are now installed in Quirino, Nueva Ecija, and Bukidnon, and at PhilRice stations in Isabela, Nueva Ecija, Los Baños, Negros, Agusan, Central Mindanao University, and Midsayap.
Ang PhilRice, nagbibigay kami ng technical assistance doon sa mga
PhilRice gives technical assistance to those who are interested, such as farmers groups and irrigators associations who can put up funds to establish the dryer. We can give them blueprints and help them in constructing the dryer because this equipment has critical parts.
Through the Post-Harvest Learning Alliance initiated by the International Rice Research Institute and PhilRice, farmers such as Mike Aquino and the Gamapaka Cooperative were able to install reversible airflow dryers in their communities. Now, they are reaping the benefits.
Wala akong nasisirang nung katulad nung nakaraan.
None of my grains are damaged, unlike before. Not a single kavan. All of my grains are dried very well, because even if there's a storm, the drying operation continues. Even if it rains day and night, the grain will be dry.
So, ang nakaayo kay ang
The benefit is that in terms of milled rice, there is higher recovery compared with sun drying.
Ibulad sa adlaw. Hindi, unlike ng mga ibang...
This is unlike other flatbed dryers that cause grains to smell like smoke or steamed fish and give bad tasting rice. It's true, I'm not just praising this. Even the commercial rice millers, they like this dryer. They say the rice does not smell and has good quality.
Bigas.
Unlike a traditional flatbed dryer, the reversible airflow dryer has a fly ash separator that prevents the ash from mixing with the grain, resulting in clean, smoke-free grains.
Tanaw nato ang mga...
The big change I have seen in the community is that the expenses incurred by farmers are lesser now.
Ay sa pang-benefits, pagdating ng rainy season, marami...
Another benefit is that I get a lot of farmers and commercial rice millers to dry here during the rainy season.
Nakikipag-dry din dito. Ibig sabihin, kumikita po rin ako ng additional income.
It means I have added income aside from producing seeds.
Yun ang benefits, kumikita pa rin.
With the flatbed dryer, drying takes only 8 hours overnight. In the morning, drying is done.
Pagka kasi madali lang ang processing, pagpapatuyo.
If drying time is short, more time is available to do other things, such as finding other means of livelihood. That is what happens. There is more time for the family.
Farmers sa murag takong...
I also hear other farmers who have not tried it say, I will use that next time because it is better. They say that they want more of this, the reversible airflow flatbed dryer, so that more farmers can use it at the same time, particularly during rainy days. The current dryer is not enough.
So itong reversible dryer,
The reversible dryer is a technology that, if used properly, can produce high-quality dried paddy. I hope that our farmers will use this so that our rice production can be improved for global competitiveness.
No single technology can solve all the problems of rice drying, but the reversible dryer is an all-weather, low-labor option for producing better quality rice.
Well, that's all the time we have on this week's edition of Farmers Connection, a presentation of the Ministry of Agriculture brought to you this week by the GRDB, GLDA, and the Pesticide Board. Farmers Connection is produced for television by Matrix Video Productions and Advertising, based in East Berbice. I'm Christopher Holder, urging you to enjoy the rest of this Sunday, and of course have a great and productive week ahead.